Who can take a flower, roll it up and make it fine, sprinkle it with knowledge and a little bit of time, cover it with headlines and a sweet euphoria too. Cannabis Man, Cannabis Man can. Who can take a story and make it feel so grand, spread the word around about the wonders of this land, mix it all with laughter and a sprinkle of insight. Cannabis Man, Cannabis Man flies. Ooh, Cannabis Man, spreading news and joy across the land, diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis Man, we're rocking. Ooh, ooh yeah. Ooh yeah. Ooh yeah. Cannabis Man, spreading news and joy across the land, diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis Man, we're rocking. Ooh, ooh yeah. Ooh yeah.
Hey, welcome into another episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Thank you so much for clicking on the show and joining in today. I'm your host, Don Kleppen. And if it's your first time here, welcome. It's a show where we're taking a journalistic look at all things cannabis. I myself am a broadcaster. I do news and traffic on the radio in Chicago. You can hear me on WGN Radio 720 AM. I'm on Saturday mornings doing news with House Smarts Radio with Lou Manfredini and Home Sweet Home Chicago with David Hochberg. Both great guys, love being on those shows, and I fill in throughout the week sometimes, whether it's doing news or business or traffic. And I've been a personal cannabis user for going on 20 years now, and it was something that, obviously a lot's changed in the last 20 years for everything. The world is very different, but for cannabis in particular, this is something that 20 years ago there were no U.S. states that had any legal places. There were some medical states that had it ongoing, but that was very early on, and only now, we're sitting here in 2024, and things are so different that we have 38 states that have legalized it for medical purposes, including, or in addition to that, the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., and 4 U.S. territories. And then for rec users, adults over 21, 24 states and 3 territories, along with D.C., have all legalized for adults over the age of 21 to use recreationally as well. And the reason I started the show was because when it became legal here in Illinois 4 years ago, back in 2020, in the news space, being a media member, I was really looking forward to the conversations that I'd had personally with friends of mine, other cannabis users. I was really looking forward to those conversations making their way into the mainstream. Hosts and radio personalities, TV personalities talking about cannabis in the ways that me and my friends always had, and the journey of discovery that many stoners kind of go on. And after, a year or two, that just did not happen. And so I decided to start this show because I felt compelled to try and bring those conversations to light, as well as do whatever small part I could to try and kill this lingering stigma that still exists today around cannabis. The propaganda from last century, the reefer madness stuff, the Nixon White House, the original drug czar Henry Anslinger under the initial FBI. These things from the 1900s, their ripple effects are still being felt today. And that is a big part of what we're dealing with when you still feel and hear the pushback toward legal cannabis. As many states as are jumping on board because of the helpfulness to its citizens, as well as the revenue that awaits them. As many states are jumping on board, there are people who are still very, very resistant to the idea of legalizing cannabis, and I believe it goes right back to that stigma. And I think the only way to kind of normalize and make it a part of our day-to-day lives is to talk about it, release new and good products products to the public, let them try them, see for themselves, make sure those products, just like anything else, are regulated, they're high quality, and that's the way that we can sort of slowly move this normalization process forward, and that was kind of the impetus for starting this Cannabis Man podcast here. And since I've started, this has grown into one of the top cannabis podcasts in the world. Still very crazy for me to say that out loud. It was voted the #1 indie news podcast by Good Pods, as well as a top 5 society and culture podcast in the independent category. So we're now being listened to in 85 countries. You heard that right, 85. So almost half of the industrialized countries around the world have listeners to this very show, and I really can't thank you enough. It's just blown me away, the kind of response and support that I've been getting, and interest. It just seems this topic is one that many more people want to explore and hear about, and I'm just so happy and grateful to be a part of it, because for my money, there is no space as exciting as the cannabis space right now. And on that note, there are always great events relating to cannabis coming up, as well as happening all around, different legal states and different countries that have legalized, which is changing all the time. And I went to one such event this week. I'm going to tell you about that. It's been a heck of a busy week. I also launched a newsletter to go along with this podcast. As much as it has grown, doing a weekly episode has not, I miss stories. There are things that I can't get to in every single episode. There are bits of conversations that I can't bring to you in these episodes for editing purposes and timing. So I decided to launch a companion newsletter, and the first issue went out this week, and I'll tell you a little about that as well. I also, on the show, the conversations that I referred to, typically I like to bring people on who are in the space, that are exploring this green frontier, whether they are doctors, researchers who are looking into cannabis, doing science on it, and finding out important information for all of us who want to continue using it. That's always very exciting to talk to them about the work they're doing and what they're finding out, and being able to take that information forward. I also like talking with business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are making products or goods or services that we connoisseurs will be able to enjoy going forward. I also will talk with politicians, elected or appointed leaders, who are now responsible for creating the cannabis laws that all of us are going to be sort of following, at least the framework of such. We're going to be kind of moving forward under those umbrellas. So I like talking with all these people, as well as other journalists or podcasters in this space covering it like I am, because people have great perspective, especially those of us who have been in it since well before legalization. And it's just cool talking about all the changes that we have witnessed here. My guest today is somebody who is both a scientist and an educator. She's been doing some really great work, not just studying the cannabis plant. She majored in it. She has a degree in that, and she has been doing some real solid work determining some molecular information about it and getting into the genetics of the plant. And not only is her studying really benefiting all of us, but she's turning around and then taking those studies and educating the public on her popular YouTube channel, Cannabichem. And I'm talking about Dr. Riley Kirk, and she'll be on the show later today. Had a wonderful conversation with her, and I look forward to bringing that to you. Also, of course, I've got my news joint wrap, talking to you about some news stories that I think were worth your attention, and some product reviews. I've been going through that Best in Grass Illinois Judge kit that I can't wait to tell you about. I'm going to talk about my favorite product from the kit later today. This thing just really blew me away. It was wonderful. If you would be so kind, please leave a rating or a review for the show. However you're listening to this, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you are, there's a chance to sort of rate the show, subscribe, leave a comment. Anything like that is really helpful for me, so I'd appreciate it if you could do that. And of course, you can follow the show on social media at C Man Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, and it's the Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook page and YouTube channels. And I always love if you interact with the show. Got some fan mail this week. You can always reach out via the text link. If you scroll down to that description show notes, underneath the title card of this episode, you'll see a Text Cannabis Man link. And if you click on that, you can leave a message and let me know about anything that I talk about during the show, whether it's a product I mention, a news story you think about, a question you have, whether it's for a guest or just about cannabis in general, or a product you think that I should try that I haven't talked about yet. Any of that, I want to hear from you, so you can text Cannabis Man anytime, and I will get that message. So without further ado, let's get into this episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast.
We'll be right back.
You know, it really is amazing living in a state where cannabis has been legalized, or a country. It's just really cool still to me to be able to go to a dispensary and buy different products. But what's even more amazing than that is growing your own cannabis at home. And if you're able to do that where you are, but maybe the prospect is a little intimidating. Maybe you've never grown anything by yourself before at home. Maybe you don't have the equipment. Maybe you don't even know where to start. Well, if the idea is appealing to you and you've thought about starting a home grow, allow me to recommend my friends at Bloom's Brothers Hydro. These guys are the best. They know exactly how to get you started or how to improve your grow operation. Wherever you are in your journey, they can help you, and they have the products you need to get this done. They've got lines in stock from Horticulture Lighting Group, Nectar for the Gods, Green Grow, Fox Farm, Royal Gold Soils, and more. And hey, maybe growing cannabis is old hat for you at this point. Maybe you've been doing it for a while, you know all you need to know about it, but maybe you've been looking to expand your garden and add a fungal element to it. You know, cannabis flower is great, but it doesn't go great on a pizza, unlike mushrooms. Those are delicious on a pizza. And if you've been interested in researching this prospect, adding some of that fungus to your own home grow, Bloom's Brothers Hydro has you covered there too. They've got supplies from Uncle Mike's, Southwest Shroomery, Redwood Mushroom Supply, and Dr. Mike's as well. You can find Bloom's Brothers Hydro inside the Apple House on Harding Avenue in Terre Haute, Indiana. They're open 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 11 a.m. to 5 on Sundays. For more information, follow them on Instagram at Apple House Hydro. You can email Fred at theapplehouse.com or call 812-232-1495 to get all the information that you're looking for. Remember, if you're thinking about starting or expanding a home grow, check out the guys at Bloom's Brothers Hydro.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis Broadcast.
I hope you have had a wonderful week. Wherever you are, whenever you're listening to this, I hope you've been enjoying life lately. It's my favorite time of year. A lot of people feel the same way. Fall is just, it has a certain magic in the air. Whether it's that sort of spookiness, the witching hour season, whatever you like to call it, the smell of the leaves in the air, the little crispness, the hint of winter just around the corner, that cold entering the air after summer, and the colors of the leaves, of course. We got football on the TV, spooky movies at night, soups in the crock pot or stews, maybe you're somebody who likes those, maybe not. But either way, this is definitely a time of year that I enjoy, and I hope you have been able to soak some of it in as well, because unlike winter, and again, I don't know where you are, but here in Chicago, where I am, the winter always seems to be the longest season of them all, and fall seems to go by in just a heartbeat. So I always try and squeeze as much out of it as I can. Summer's the same way, but fall is, it's just a little more comfortable for me. I'm kind of, born in Wisconsin. I've got, Nordic blood in me, and so I'm just a hardier, kind of a stockier guy, and so I prefer cooler temperatures. Got out for some golf this week with my buddy Kirk, and I like playing golf in the cooler temps just like everything else. So whatever you've been up to, whatever you're doing, I hope you're able to enjoy it. I was able to get out for this morning and do a nice little workout, just jumping on the elliptical for half an hour or so, and and I was able to get outside and meditate, get in the grass, took my shoes off, sat by the water for a bit, and just did some breath work. Haven't mentioned it on the show for a while, but I've talked about using the free app Insight Timer, and you can set a little bed for yourself, a little amount of time, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, and you can choose guided or unguided meditations. I went with guided for a while. There are a lot of great people on there to help guide you through a little session to clear your mind, but I just use the bed that I've created for myself, which I played on a previous episode, and then it's timed out to 10 minutes, and then I just kind of try and focus on my breath and keep my mind clear. And I find that a lot like maintaining cannabis as part of my daily regimen, meditation goes hand in hand with that, and I find that those two things, along with exercise, and these are things that just kind of help clear my mind. I like the way they make me feel. They allow me a little time every day. The meditation does anyway to kind of practice some gratitude, and cannabis leans into that as well. And I think we're kind of in an age where acknowledging or at least being grateful for some of the privileges we all enjoy, and maybe you don't think of life in this day and age as a privilege, and hey, I don't blame you. It's not like everyone can maintain that perspective all the time. Life is hard, and sometimes, some days, really just, it doesn't pay to get out of bed. I fully get that. But at the same time, as I talked about with my guests last week from Hashdash, Scott and Jordan, there is a little bit of an attitude that I try to cultivate and keep, which is that those of us here on Earth right now, if you're alive in 2024, wherever you are, you're enjoying the greatest privilege. And especially those of us here in America, I just think that it's oftentimes a privilege that just goes by the wayside, because a privilege you're especially born into, by nature you don't appreciate it, because it's just, you don't know any other way. And so I do get that, but I just, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think cannabis and meditating and exercise, they help me maintain a little sense of appreciation. They help me at least take a little time throughout the day to find things that I'm grateful for and really dwell on them for a little bit. And that practice bleeds into the rest of my day. It bleeds into the rest of my perspective throughout time, and I just think it's worth it. So if you haven't, if you've been busy, if you haven't had time to do any of those things, if you haven't been able to get exercise in, if you haven't, you don't need to put on a bed from Insight Timer. You can just go outside, put your feet in the grass or on the sand of a beach, and just, try and close your eyes and breathe deeply through your nose and hold it for a few seconds and then out your mouth, and do that a few cycles. I think you'll find your mind clears up a little bit, and when you open your eyes again, the world seems to be a friendlier and just a better place. And that's something that's a small thing that I think we can all do, but in this age of fast reactions and social media and grievance, parlance, I think that these are things that I try and make sure I have time for every day, and I'm passing it along to you. I think it's worth doing. Something else that I had go on this week, I always loved making it to cannabis events whenever I can, and there have been some wonderful ones around the country, and especially here in Illinois. And I went to one of them this week. This was the Benzinga Conference After Party. The Shy High Afters is what it was called, and it was held on the near west side. It was sort of south of Wicker Park near Ukrainian Village. I'm not exactly sure which part of town it was in. It was at a place called Homestead on the Roof, and it was off Chicago Avenue. And I wasn't really sure what to expect when I was going over there. I got invited by somebody, and I was really appreciative to get that. And so I hopped over. The event venue had changed from one week to the next, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. But when I got there and we went through the bar, up the stairs, onto the rooftop where this event was held, I was blown away. This rooftop was just perfect for an October evening, not too cold, not too hot. It was beautifully pleasant, and a rooftop in Chicago, let me tell you, if you haven't been, do yourself a favor and get to one of them, because on a night, especially a summer night or a fall night, rooftops in Chicago are just the place to be. And there were so many wonderful people who were there at this Benzinga after party, the Shy High Afters event, which was put on by Madeline Scanlon, by the way. I've met her a couple of times now. She is lovely, and she puts on a hell of a party. And so anything that she does going forward, I am definitely going to try and make an attempt to get there, because I just met so many cool people, and there were people there with their booths set up, brands around with pre-rolls rolling, and there were, edibles around and candies and swag, and there was some excellent food provided by Homestead on the roof, and it was just a couple of hours on a rooftop in Chicago in a beautiful night with cannabis smoke just thick in the air and wonderful vibes that you couldn't buy anywhere else that you'd get to in the world. And I just want to go to more of these things, and I encourage you to do the same. If you get a chance to go to a cannabis party, what are you waiting for? Because these things are brand new. It's sort of, I'm imagining it's a little bit like the speakeasies and the prohibition, because even though there are some states where it's legal, federally it's still so restricted, and we are waiting on pins and needles for the rescheduling announcement, hopefully coming next year after that December 2nd administrative hearing announced by the DEA. But either way, I just really encourage you to get to these, and I had such a blast at the Shy High Afters from the Benzinga conference. I'm definitely going to be doing more of these. But great job, Madeline, and thanks a lot to everybody who showed me such a great time. And before I jump into the news joint wrap, I wanted to tell you about the newsletter that I launched this week. As I mentioned at the top of the show, there is a lot, as you may realize if you've been paying attention to the show here, or you're just into the cannabis space. There is a lot of news, and it happens every single day. This frontier where states are legalizing cannabis and federally it's still restricted, countries are legalizing, whether medically or for adult rec use. There is so much changing in the cannabis landscape every single day. I cannot get to it all in a weekly podcast episode. I don't think I could get to it all even in a daily episode, and I would love to do that, but I don't yet have the time or the ability to make that happen. But what I could do and decided to do was add a newsletter to this podcast. And so every week there will be a new issue of this newsletter, which I have called the Weekly Chronic. I gave a little wrap-up of what the show is like. I talked about this episode, teasing Riley Kirk as the guest, talked about some news stories that I wasn't able to get to in last week's Cannabis Man episode, and gave some perspective about not only the news stories, but where things are headed, talking a lot like I do on this show about what the events mean for us going forward in the cannabis space. I'll be talking about products like I do here on the show. I'll be talking about events coming up as well, and just kind of giving you more of this information that I do here on the Cannabis Man podcast. And I also understand that sometimes you don't have time to listen to an hour-long podcast. Some weeks are busy. Sometimes maybe you have a drive or travel that makes it work well, or you got some errands to do. Other times the week goes by and you just don't have time to listen. But reading a newsletter, a little snapshot that'll take you about 10 minutes to read, that'll allow you to keep plugged into the cannabis space. You'll still hear news stories that I think are worth your time, and there'll be stories that you don't necessarily get here on the podcast. I'll also be providing some exclusive content to subscribers of the Weekly Chronic. I'll be talking about stuff that I definitely don't get to here. I'll be giving some guest perspective and some behind-the-scenes looks at kind of what I do to make these episodes come to air. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, if you want to read sometimes rather than listen, or hey, you can do both, because I'm not just recycling and rehashing the same information. These are two different publications here. And the interviews that are done here on the podcast, those are not going to be the interviews I do on the newsletter. These are two separate things, but they go well together, like PB&J, like cannabis and coffee. Anything, think of your sweetest combination. That's what I envision for the Cannabis Man podcast, and now the Weekly chronic. So if you're interested in that, there's a link below. You can click on it. It'll take you to the Substack page where I publish the newsletter, and you can subscribe there. Really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the Weekly Chronic, and I always appreciate you listening to this podcast as well. Now let's get into the News Joint Wrap, and it's a wrap-up of news stories and events around Illinois relating to cannabis, all curated for you by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. It's, as I think of it, the joint you can hit for all your Illinois cannabis news and reviews. And let's start with some news. This Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, IDFPR, is working to expand medical cannabis tax rates to all dispensaries. For the last several months, News Joint's been trying to confirm to an official on the record to get comment from the Cannabis Regulation Oversight Office, the CROO, CROO, and also IDFPR, about if or when registered medical cannabis patients would be allowed to receive the medical tax rate at any dispensary in Illinois instead of only licensed medical dispensaries. That's the key distinction here. Even though there are lots of dispensaries popping up around Illinois, which is great, we want this increased competition as opposed to just the MSOs, which we had for the first 2 years because of all the lawsuits and whatnot. I've talked about that at length on previous episodes. Do me a favor, and if you want to know more, check those out. I won't get into them now, but either way, we are seeing more dispensaries pop up in Illinois, which is awesome. However, as Jason Brown points out of Illinois News Joint here, a lot of those dispensaries do not allow medical patients to enjoy their tax rates, which is to say 0, as opposed to the very high tax rates of recreational customers. A lot of us with medical cards, I know, if you're going and you're buying medical, that's one of the big reasons you're doing it. You get to skip the line, you get to skip the taxes, and it's wonderful. But not every dispensary allows you that privilege, even though you are a medical card holder. They do not all have medical licensed distributor status. And so you can go to a cannabis dispensary with your med card, and maybe they have a discount or something, but they might not be able to honor the tax rate that you're used to. So that is what Jason's talking about here. And he mentions this 144-page report compiled by the CROO and IDFPR. It says it's in its data summary. It's looking ahead to fiscal year 2025. IDFPR has already begun its efforts to further expand access to cannabis, both to consumers and medical patients. In coordination with the Cannabis Regulation Oversight Office and legislators, IDFPR has begun efforts to allow med patients to receive their medical tax rate at any dispensary in Illinois. This development harkens back to the, quote, compassion in the original Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Program Act and underscores the importance of never losing sight of the patients who were the foundation of this industry, end quote. So the point here is you can look forward maybe to next year, 2025, the fiscal year here. IDFPR says they're looking to expand the medical cannabis tax rates to all dispensaries in Illinois. That is something I think we can all look forward to. There's another article here by Jason Brown. He does a lot of great work for IllinoisNewsJoint.com. He started this publication, and the coverage that he does is excellent. I think it's second to none. But he points out here that Oakton College is at the forefront of cannabis education in Illinois. I myself am an alumnus of OCC. I went to Oakton Community College for 2 years before I went to Columbia College Chicago and got into radio. And I will tell you, and I'll tell my daughter Violet when it comes time to college, I think community college, and especially Oakton, I think it's one of the best decisions I ever made. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do for a career. Still really don't in some cases, but the point being, I certainly didn't know when I was 18. And then high school ends, and then you're just supposed to jump into college, and you take these, go to a university out of state maybe, and you rack up this debt, and you take on loans, and you chase a degree for 4 years, and maybe you end up working in that field, maybe you don't. But I think that saddling 18-year-olds with a lifetime of debt for a degree that may or may not be meaningless by the time they're 40, I don't think that's the best system of doing things. And so my opinion is that community colleges provide a stellar service Hills, and Oakton is at the top of that list. I'll tell anybody that I had a great time there and I'm glad I did it. I would do it over again. But that was even before they were at the forefront of cannabis education here. I have interviewed the head of the Oakton, the OCC Cannabis Education. You can find that episode. I believe it was the first year that I was doing the podcast, but if you want to hear more about it, you can, but it's obviously grown since then. And one of the things you can do, one of the programs you can major in if you go to Oakton is cannabis courses for the Cannabis Dispensary and Patient Care Specialist Certificate. Now, this all started back in 2018 and 2019 for Oakton, and they've just been building it out since then. So if you want to find out about this, there is an article which I've linked below listed under the News Joint Wrap, and I cannot recommend that enough. And if you do try that program, let me know what you think of it. And then there are some reviews always on IllinoisNewsJoint.com. One of the recent ones, Honey Bun Hop Infused Pre-Rolls by NGW and Half Acre. That would be Nature's Grace and Wellness. Another review, Grunts Surf Disposable by Bloom, one of their vape pens, cartridges there. Acai Gelato X Shelby by Canact Wellness. And another recent review, Sour Pink Grapefruit Live Resin Vape Cart by Cresco, one of the largest operators in Illinois. And all of that stuff is happening. I also wanted to tell you about, there was a recent review, Coffee Creamer Infused Shake by NGW. I got to try some of that in a very large joint at the Benzinga after party, the Shy High Afters I went to Tuesday night. And so I got a few hits of that Coffee Creamer Infused Shake, and I got to tell you, I loved it. The aftertaste was very pleasant. It was a lot like taking a sip of coffee with some creamer in it. Even down to the texture, like the feeling on my tongue was such that it was like, wow, this is a lot like, and I drink my coffee black. My wife Gretchen loves coffee creamer and whatnot, so I do get the occasional sip. I also on the weekends will throw some Baileys in my coffee. That's my coffee creamer that I enjoy from time to time. But I wasn't really sure, shake is something that kind of, is hit or miss for me. Sometimes it's really dried out. This coffee creamer infused shake made for a hell of a joint, and I would recommend it just based on my trying it this Tuesday night at that Shy High Afters Benzinga after party. So check out the Coffee Creamer Shake by NGW. That's just my opinion, not a paid endorsement by any means, but if you do try it, let me know what you think. Send Cannabis Man a text down below. And you can find out more reviews, more information there, news, events, all coming up for you at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Now I'd like to get into my product of the week, my strain of the week that I sometimes call it. I'm sitting here in the booth right now. I've got my coffee with me. I don't know if you're a coffee drinker listener. I know a lot of people like pairing cannabis with tea. There are a lot of great reasons to do that, and I do sometimes enjoy teas in the afternoons. I mainly keep tea to my dry months, and I do have another dry month coming up in January. I will talk about the tolerance break I take there. I always take a break from alcohol, added sugars, caffeine, cannabis. It is a hellish January, but I like to take the theory that Mark Twain offered, eat the frog, he used to say, which means do the most difficult part of your day early, in the beginning. Start your day with the hard part, and it's all downhill from there, and start the year in January with a tea break, with the dry month, and I find that it also helps me. I like the way that puts me. It sucks to get through, but there's reasons I do it. But the reason I'm bringing that up right now is because there is a shop here in Edgewater, Metropolis Coffee Shop. It's on Granville. It's a little bit west of Sheridan. And it's a local shop, but they sell their lines of coffee beans all over Chicago. I believe you can get them at their website as well. This is an unpaid endorsement. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I regularly, since living in Edgewater, I've gone over to the shop. I get myself either a latte or a cappuccino made right there, and I'll sip on it in the shop, or I'll just buy a bag of beans and bring it home here, grind them up and throw them in the coffee maker. And I've got this Vietnam blend that my wife got going here, kind of a lighter roast. And as I said, I don't put anything in it. It's just coffee, but I really enjoy combining cannabis and coffee every morning as much as I can. And that is what I've done today. Cheers to you. And hey, if you like coffee, check out Metropolis. Again, unpaid endorsement, but I like what they do, and I'd be curious if you do too. Okay. So in terms of cannabis products, though, let's be real. That's the important thing to talk about here. This product that I tried this week was absolutely my favorite out of the Best in Grass Illinois judging kit. Now, this is a competition I've been going through since late August. They debuted Best in Grass. They debuted this contest back in Illinois, this judging competition, and I got a text asking about this. This is from Chicago. 9894 were the last four digits of the number that texted this. Chicago, Illinois, came through just yesterday on the 10th. Great show and content. Thank you very much, Chicago. How do you become a judge for the review kits? It asks for an access code. Great question, and thank you for the text. Really appreciate that. What you do is you go to bestingrass.io. And by the way, if you're going to do this, you want to do it now because judging ends on the 13th. So this episode's coming out on the 11th. You got 2 days to get through any one of these judging kits. But then at the end of the month, there will be an award show. There's going to be, trophies given out for the best cannabis products. It's going to be a blast. I'll be there. I can't wait for this. But to your question, 9894, go to the website, bestingrass.io, find a dispensary in Illinois that is selling the judge kits, which again, if you go quickly, you can still find it. And even if you can't submit your judgments, look for this next year and you can still make your way through a kit of great products made right here in Illinois. So I totally think it's worth it if you still want to do it. But again, you got to get out there quickly. So you find a store on the locator of bestingrass.io, go to that store, purchase your judge kit, and there is a QR code on the kit. There is a little slip inside of the package. You pull that out, you scan the QR code, it takes you to the website, then you register yourself as a judge. And then you can access a portal. That is where you enter your judgments for these products. So I hope that answers your question. If you buy the kit, you'll get access to the QR code and you can make your judging portal. That is where you become the judge for these review kits. I hope that answered your question. And again, thank you very much for texting and thank you for listening to the Cannabis Man Podcast. Now, on to the product that I tried this week. These are hash drops from Arise, A-E-R-I-Z. Full spectrum hash drops in the flavor guava. Refresh is what they have on the front of this package. I gotta say, the package itself, I love. It's like a little tin container for breath mints. If anybody is familiar with those old school mint containers, that's what these come in. It's very, very easy to open and close, and it's secure. It's not just one of these pouches with a resealable lid there. This is something that you can protect. And that alone was something I really enjoyed. But then I cracked into these, and the ratio of these full spectrum hash drops from Arise, the guava refresh from Arise, the ratio is 1:1:1 THC, CBD, and CBG, which is a cannabinoid that I have been seeing in more and more products, and I'm excited to see it out there because it is a fun time. The CBG stuff that I've had, I have enjoyed. The ingredients for these Arise Guava hash drops are sugar, corn syrup, water, fruit concentrate, pectin, fruit flavor, malic acid, MCT, full spectrum cannabis oil, CBD, CBG, natural color, sodium citrate, and lecithin maybe, Lecithin. Not really sure about that, but either way, the pectin, as you may have heard me say before, I think makes a world of difference regarding these gummies, the texture specifically. Most gummies are made of gelatin. They have been for a long time. If you're familiar with gelatin products, you know the texture of what you're getting into there, and a lot of the gummies have that same texture, but pectin gummies, these things are wonderful. So that it started with the texture when I put this in my mouth, the full spectrum hash drops guava refresh from Arise. I put these in my mouth and the pectin gummy, chewing into it was a pleasure. Really enjoy biting into those. Just the soft give when you bite into it, and the fact that it doesn't break apart into little gelatin cubes. It's just kind of stays thick in bigger pieces, and then you're just kind of chewing on the gummy that way. Really enjoy it. And the flavor of the guava Guava Refresh. It was not strong, it was subtle, but it stayed with you, and it was very pleasant the whole time. I'm not somebody I wouldn't say I look for guava very much as a flavor. You see a lot of the similar flavors of like mango. You see a lot of, strawberry and raspberry. You see a lot of citrusy sort of leaning stuff. And guava is something that I thought was unique. And as I tried these things, as I said, they're 1-to-1-to-1 with the THC, CBD, CBG. The feelings of them lasted a couple of hours. It never got me too high or too low. It brought me to a place I wanted to be, and then I hung out there for about 2 hours. I was taking 1 or 2 of these at a time, and I really enjoyed it throughout the week. These are going to be my highest marks on the judging portal, 10 out of 10 stars, and I will be looking for these again. The Arise Full Spectrum Hash Drops Guava Refresh comes with 10 in a package. As I said, you get the THC, CBD, and CBG. Mentioned it a couple of times. I'm sure you've gotten it now, but either way, if you are out at a dispensary and you're looking for a fun time this fall, and you're going to be outside among the leaves with people you love, maybe there's a cookout, maybe somebody's got chili in the crock pot, maybe you got a TV in your backyard watching football on a Sunday, pop some of these full-spectrum hash drops from Arise, pass around the guava flavor, and see if you people don't have a wonderful time. I'm sure you would already, not saying you need it, but if you want to elevate the party a little bit, I think these hash drops from Arise do exactly that. I will certainly be looking for these in the future, and I really enjoyed the hell out of them this week. For my money, these are the best that the Illinois Best in Grass judging competition had to offer. Really hoping they get a gold medal this year. Listener, my guest today has a fascinating story to tell and some great expertise to share. You know that I am very excited about this new legal cannabis space that is changing all the time across, it's patchwork right now here in the U.S. Different states have their different laws, but we are still, at the time of recording this in September of 2024, we're still waiting on pins and needles for the rescheduling news from the DEA. And when that happens, things will be open a little bit more. But in the meantime, as this landscape is shifting all the time, we're finding out new information every single day about cannabis, the different new legal products that are out there, along with the new information that is found via studies, federal research at universities and different facilities that are looking into some of the questions we still have about cannabis. A lot of them, we know great information. My friend from Normal, Paul Armentano, who's been in it 30 years, likes to say that we know all we need to know about cannabis, which I get that philosophy, but I also don't fault people for wanting to know more. And the more we find out, there's still plenty of specific questions out there. And that is where certain channels and avenues to find out that information come in. And on YouTube, YouTube is where everybody's playing today. It seems like everything's coalescing there. Cable, podcasts, TV shows, content for kids, you name it. YouTube is the biggest platform around the world right now. And there's a wide spectrum of quality in terms of the information that's presented on there. But on the end of expertise, the good end, where I like to kind of hang out, that is where my guest likes to play. And she has a great story and some deep information to share regarding cannabis. She has her PhD in pharmaceutical sciences, specializing in studying the chemistry of nature, and her channel on YouTube, Cannabichem, gets into the chemistry and pharmacology of cannabis. She's also a daily user and uses a variety of other bioactive natural products. Listener, please welcome Dr. Riley Kirk. Welcome, Riley.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm so stoked to be here and talk about some cannabis research.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should have checked this before I started recording. I do this, I fail in this regard all the time, but I should have checked the pronunciation of your channel. Is it Cannabichem, Cannabichem? How do you say it?
You're actually one of the only people ever to pronounce it correctly. I do say Cannabichem, but I also don't care how people pronounce it. I know even like the word, cannabinoid. A lot of people say cannabinoid. People say endocannabinoid system. People say endocannabinoid system. And honestly, if you're talking about it, I already love you. So that's all I need to know.
Well, I'm glad you have that perspective, because I actually sometimes flip-flop the pronunciation within the same interview. Sometimes I say it both different ways in one conversation. I've been finding cannabinoid a little more fun to say just because of the rhythm of it, but I think cannabinoid's a little more natural too. So your channel on YouTube, Cannabichem, that's where you're putting out some great videos. I was looking at some of the recent ones. You're talking to other experts in the field as well, talking about the science of breeding, smells. There's a lot of great stuff on here. But before we get into the videos, tell us a little about yourself and kind of how you got into this space.
Sure, yeah. I guess I never thought I'd end up in the cannabis space, but it feels so natural that I am here. So just some background. I have used cannabis since I was about 14 years old, almost every day. And I had seizures growing up and never really understood that using cannabis made my seizures stop. That timeline was the same timeline. Actually, until I started researching cannabis and kind of had this epiphany, wow, that's why my brain feels so at home when I'm using this plant. It really does put my brain at ease and really helps me think and focus and just not have to worry about that as much. It makes me feel normal. But, I never thought that I would end up working with cannabis every day and studying cannabis and being such an advocate for it. I always loved science. I always loved nature. I was always making these teas and tinctures out of all these wild medicinal plants in Maine, where I grew up, and I still do that. But I went to undergraduate college kind of lost, not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I loved the discovery process. I loved teaching. I loved learning. I loved communicating. But, I never really found my path for a while. So I just entered the biotech industry as a scientist, and I was just doing the same thing every day. And I didn't know what was happening with the stuff I was testing. I just knew it was my job. And I didn't like that.
Yeah.
If anybody out there who knows me, I have probably the most creative brain on the planet. And it's very hard to get me to focus on one thing for longer than a couple hours. So that type of repetitive work did not vibe well with who I am as a person. And I was working in biotech kind of being okay, what's next? Because this is not sustainable. I'm not happy. I need to be more creative, but I want to keep doing science. And actually at that biotech job, I was talking to a woman, and she's like, well, you should look into where my daughter-in-law is going to grad school. I think you'd really be interested. So I talked to her, and she was in this natural products program at the University of Rhode Island. So I went down there, I interviewed with a few people. I vibed so well with this one professor. And actually, he ended up being my PI, or the principal investigator that I was working under. And I really don't think I'd be where I am today without him, because he essentially encouraged me to be creative and to explore things that we didn't even have funding for, which is so rare in the sciences to have that freedom. And the only reason I was able to do it is because I still got everything else I needed to get done. And I would work 14 hours a day, which I'm not saying everyone should do, but right. I loved doing it. I wanted to be in the lab 24/7. It was free discovery, free exercise for your brain, free discovery. You had all of these tools just at your disposal. So grad school, I actually had a very, very positive experience. I was able to make a medicinal plant extract library and study all these traditionally used medicinal plants, looking for new molecules, looking for validating those traditional uses. And it wasn't actually till, I think it was my second to last year of graduate school, the university put out a cannabis program. And they needed a teaching assistant for it. And there was just no question who was going to do that. Everyone's like, Riley, because I was just an open stoner. I mean, I walk the walk, I talk the talk. I am a stoner through and through. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I still did amazing in school. So I was chosen for the teaching assistant, and I would make these videos telling the students, how certain things work, or explaining pharmacology, explaining all these things. And I really, really enjoyed digesting that content into these small snips that people could really understand, and take that literature and deconvolute it in a way that makes people interested in something that they didn't necessarily think that they'd be interested in. And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
and I was a scientist who was addicted to being in the lab, and all of a sudden I had to go home. I had to not be in the lab. And I was sitting and I was writing and I was doing that all day, and I kept coming across these bits, and I'm like, man, everyone should know this. Every cannabis consumer should know this information. It's so important for understanding how this plant works in the body, the different medicinal uses, harm reduction even. So I, pulled out my phone. TikTok was really big at the time. Pressed record. I don't know what my first video was on. I think it was on the endocannabinoid system, or maybe just cannabinoids in general. And it just blew up on TikTok. And then the next one did. And then the next one did. And, all of a sudden I had 100,000 followers. And I was like, wow, people want to learn about this, but we don't really have, actually you were talking about Paul from Normal. I'm also familiar with Paul, and I really, really respect the work he does.
Yeah.
And he's so right. We do have the information out there, all of the information we need. What we're missing is communicating it back to the cannabis consumers to actually utilize that information.
Right.
Like, it's out there, but we have this missing link where it's really never been deconvoluted for people to understand. So I started doing that on TikTok, and just kept, talking about new studies that are coming out, talking about new research, talking about kind of the whole landscape of cannabis research and education. And that TikTok channel actually got me my first job in the cannabis industry, because they needed a scientist who was able to communicate.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, like, this is amazing that, I always say that the internet, you can use it as a resume. You don't have to do dances. You can if you want,
Yeah.
But you can use the internet to find your dream job, to essentially put out into the world what you can do, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and find the community that you want. And, I still do create content on TikTok, but since then, as you were talking about, I've really moved towards longer form content on YouTube, and Instagram kind of hates cannabis more than anyone.
Yeah.
But, I'm really trying to go more towards YouTube more than anything, because I think these long form discussions are really, really important. And I think there's a huge need and want for it right now. So, and eventually, I guess I'll fast forward a little bit, but about a year ago, myself and Dr. Miyabi Shields started a research and education nonprofit organization called NAP, which is the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy. And essentially what this means is we want to research the actual practical applications of natural products, how people have traditionally been using them, how people are currently using them, and then how we can fill the gaps in those research studies, and then again, communicate that back so that everyone can understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how they can utilize it in their everyday life.
Wow, that's amazing, Riley. That's a hell of a story, and there was a lot there to unpack, so let me try and take it step by step here. But let me just say, like, right from the start, your discovery of cannabis and how it improved your quality of life, that's a really impactful story. I think that I talk with a lot of people on the show about the different reasons why they brought it into their own lives. Myself, it was, I was probably about 17, and it was that I'd always struggled getting to sleep at night. And then when my friends introduced me to it, it was fun at parties and whatnot, but then what I also noticed was I got better nights of sleep after using it than I did anything else. And so that's what led it to being a more regular part of my life. But for you, something as major as like alleviating you from having so many seizures and making your brain get into a place where, as you said, you kind of felt more normal and natural, that is a quality of life improvement that is so massive, and I think it's so cool that you move forward. Cannabis becomes a regular part of your life. As you said, you're an outspoken stoner. I certainly went through that in college as well. It was just, there was no hiding it. It was just like, well, this is me. I'm doing that between classes. Yes, I'm doing it afterwards. But, as you said, you were still a good student. I think that showing people that you can still be functional and then being open about it, that is a part of even doing this show and your YouTube channel, Cannabicam, and also I love the nonprofit too, the educational element. As you said, the information's out there, but that is not as well known as the stereotypes, as the propaganda, the stigma that still lingers from last century. That is something I talk about a lot on the show, and I think it's difficult to kill that stigma, because once something is baked into the public lexicon, once people have an understanding or think they do of something, it can be hard to break away from that. And so having conversations like this, long form ones like you're doing on YouTube, sort of spinning our wheels like we are, but in making the effort to change the branding of cannabis, that is sort of the fight that I think a lot of us are in right now. And by presenting a professional front, by letting people know that, hey, that image from the DARE education that we got back in the 90s of the lazy stoner, the scrambled egg in the pan, and it's like, here, this is your brain or whatever, all the goofy stuff that they crammed into us, it's like, hey, that's not only, inaccurate, but the opposite can be true. There have been a lot of successful, productive people who are goal-oriented, who are motivated, who use cannabis maybe every single day for various reasons, and you can too. There's nothing that says that if this works for you, that you can't have it as a part of your life. And that's something I say on the show all the time. Like, I'm not here saying cannabis is right for everyone, but I am saying that it's right for a lot of us. And for those of us who know that it is, why should we be restricted from keeping it as a part of our life? Or, why can't that be normalized the way that other things in our society are, like caffeine, sugar, alcohol, that kind of thing?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And growing up, I never ever heard somebody talk about cannabis as like a wellness tool, as something that can just be a part of your life, of your everyday life, and just make you more productive, make you more social, make you more comfortable in your own body. I never heard these conversations. It was always just those people that exist on the peripheral part of society that,
yes,
are just doing drugs.
Yeah.
And also I'm writing a book currently, and I decided on a title, which is Reefer Wellness, which is a play on reefer madness, for exactly what you're talking about. It's going to really be designed to use science to reverse the stigma and say, hey, everyone, you were fed all this information with absolutely no scientific background, and it brainwashed everyone. So let me offer you some of the studies that have been published so you can learn about the actual medicinal benefits of this plant, some patient stories, and really get a new outlook on cannabis, because it really isn't this, crazy, lazy stoner stereotype that we see. Most of the people that I know are entrepreneurs, doctor, lawyers, nurses, EMTs, all of these, really professional jobs. And people use cannabis because life is hard. We need to be able to regulate our nervous systems and calm down without having toxins in our body like we often see with nicotine or alcohol products. And I love what you said about this is not for everyone. I know it's not for everyone. I've seen people use cannabis and said, wow, your brain probably does not need cannabis. You're not reacting well to this.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with every substance. I always use tobacco as an example because my body rejects tobacco. If I try any bit of tobacco, I'm going to projectile vomit. But I'm also, not campaigning to have it removed from every shelf in the world. I'm just saying, okay, I'm not going to use tobacco, and that's my choice as a sentient human being, that I'm just not going to put that into my body. But you do you. I'm going to do me.
Right. Totally. Well said. And I'm the same, by the way. I was up in Milwaukee. Wisconsin is still very much anti-cannabis, and I've talked a lot on the show about how deep the alcohol lobby is there. Wisconsin is big time entrenched into big alcohol, so I think that's a big reason why. But so I visit my friends and family who are up there, and they take me to a hookah bar in downtown Milwaukee.
Oh, God.
And oh my God, when I tell you that I was in the bathroom just chugging on the vape pen of cannabis that I had in my pocket in order to stop myself from vomiting from the hookah, that was my experience with it. And so I'm right there with you with the tobacco there. But it is funny how just this, as we're talking about, it's the stigma is hard to distance ourselves from. That branding was so powerfully done done by the Nixon administration and others, after the 70s and whatnot. And I got to say, I love the title of the book that you're working on, Reefer Wellness, is so excellent. And I can't wait to read it because I know that you're going to put in there the kinds of things that people should be knowing about cannabis, the things that are better to understand, which, as we said, there are real quality of life benefits that it can offer you. And maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. But, as we were talking about with tobacco, also with alcohol, alcohol is what we've leaned on so much in society, cigarettes for a while too, but that's going away, thankfully. But, there's a sort of a movement right now where people are reevaluating their relationship with alcohol too, here in America, certainly, and I feel around the world as well. But there are a lot of reasons why somebody might be reevaluating that relationship. You get older, the hangovers kind of hit you a bit harder. That's how it is for me, certainly. There's a lot of reasons why you might not want to do that. And that doesn't mean that people want to go sober. It doesn't mean they want to live sober if alcohol's not doing it for them anymore. They still want something that takes the edge off, that, as you said, maybe lowers their anxiety, makes them feel socially lubricated like we all like to do at a party, or at home at the end of a stressful day. You want to ingest something that makes you feel better, makes you, enjoy your time with your loved ones a little more, time out in nature, be more mindful. These really good things that people are seeking, cannabis is there to kind of help you along that path. And so anyway, I guess I just mean to say I'm looking forward to Reefer Wellness is what I'm trying to say.
I really appreciate that. I really have enjoyed the process of writing the book because I feel like I have so much in my head that I'm always trying to blurt out in conversations.
Yeah, sure.
And it's just too much. And I really love the conversation around politics too, because it goes so much deeper because cannabis is an enlightenment tool. It really helps us think differently, question things a little more, build community, and I think there's more to the government being against cannabis than what we're led to believe. I always call it a gateway drug, but in a positive way, where cannabis can really help you find a community and really help you find yourself at a deeper level. And I do think that has been part of the prohibition, is trying to inhibit free thinking, because if you think of the timeline of when cannabis really started to be prohibited, there was kind of this huge anti-government movement at the same time that was, heavily facilitated by hippie stoners and just people who were free thinkers and wanted to live a more free, less regulated life.
Yes, yeah, well said. And I bring that up on the show. I've talked about it with certain guests in the past as well. You're so right about that. I think one of the reasons why, talking about not just the prohibition, but even before that, back in the 50s and 60s, there was this movement toward trying to really ramp up the productivity of the American people and compartmentalize their lives. They, whether it was both parents in the household or just the breadwinner, go to work and you work for 8-10 hours, whatever it is, and you go home and you're supposed to be kind of like this proud functioning member of the American society. But there were certain drugs, certain substances, let's say like caffeine and cigarettes, that were heavily pushed as an effort to maintain that productivity. It's all about, hey, you're working your 12-hour shift, take your break for 10 minutes, have your cup of coffee, have your cigarette, and get the heck back to work. Cannabis does not fall in to that narrative. It, as you said, it is a gateway drug, but I love that notion of it's being a gateway for good, because it basically, it does lead you to that sort of, at least personal enlightenment, and it leads you to question why you're doing things or why you're not doing things. And that it goes against the kind of productivity, the kind of obedience, I suppose, that was really being crammed down from above. And so what you're talking about, Riley, in terms of why cannabis was prohibited, and psychedelics at large, and we are kind of in the midst of a revolution on that front. It's not just cannabis, and I know you know this as well, but obviously certain states are looking into legalizing psychedelics like psilocybin, like what's in mushrooms. They're also looking at ketamine has had a very, it's again, the debate's still out there, but there are reasons why these therapeutic programs and why healers are pushing these products as much as they are, it's because of their healing potential. And that doesn't always fall in line with somebody just being a good soldier or a good capitalist worker who's happy working 12, 14 hours a day, never seeing their kids or whatever, and not questioning why they're doing those things. Cannabis kind of goes against that. You might be wondering why you are or if you want to keep that up. And I do think that that was a big part of the prohibition at large here.
Oh, man, absolutely. And I think one other component of it is, especially for medical patients, cannabis offers a different level of autonomy compared to the traditional pharmaceutical medicine workflow that we're used to, where you go see a physician, you say what's wrong with you, they give you a pill, they tell you to take it at this time of day every day, and eventually you'll feel better, right? With cannabis, it's you are choosing the variety that you want to use. You're choosing the consumption method you want to use. You're choosing when you dose and what that dose is. It's a very complex natural product. You can even grow it, if you want to, if you have that ability. And that is so out of the traditional system of medicine that, that's definitely a additional part of this is follow the money, follow the profits, right? If we're able to make this medicine or use in community and not have to rely on our government, that I'm sure was very scary to the government and still is, and is definitely part of the reason why we don't have full access to this plant yet.
Yeah, 100%. I've definitely mentioned that on the show before too. We talked about big alcohol before, but big pharma is absolutely another arm of this monster that's keeping cannabis at bay, I suppose. It is, as you just kind of talked about, there's this whole healthcare system we have here in the West and in the U.S. I mean, don't even get me started on the insurance stuff, but if when you go and you see a doctor, you see a specialist, and they're like, okay, we're going to prescribe you this thing to deal with your symptoms. So then you take that thing, whatever that pill is, and then maybe you find that you have a side effect from it. Anybody who sees these commercials that are running constantly on the TV about which pill that you should be taking, the little list at the bottom or at the end of the ad that tells you what side effects are possible. Well, guess what the answer is from the healthcare professional when you go back and tell them that this pill is giving me headaches or keeps me up at night or restricts my appetite or whatever. Guess what? We have another pill for that. And now you get to take that once a day. And, oh, now this one is making me dizzy. Well, here's a third pill. And before you know it, all of us are taking 10, 12 pills a week, especially as people get older and stuff like that. And so when on the other side of it, you have a natural plant like cannabis that might be able to deal with the initial thing that sent you to the doctor, as well as any subsequent problems that those prescribed pills might give you, that is very scary to the bottom line of any pharmaceutical companies. Why would they want someone who can grow a plant in their backyard that deals with all of their ills when that means that they can't prescribe you the 10 pills that are going to cost you $2,000 a month or whatever? That's going to eat into their bottom lines. And it is, I believe anyway, it is very much a big part of why we're still dealing with this restrictions as much as we are.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's so silly when everyone's like, oh, we don't have enough research on cannabis. We don't have enough research on cannabis. And then it's like Ozempic comes out and it makes you skinny. And then everybody's swallowing it like there's no tomorrow. And it's like, well, do we have enough research there?
Right. You're cool with that because of the skinniness and because everyone's on it and it's popular now. But this thing that's been around for thousands of years, like you're still not comfortable? It's a little strange, a bit of a double standard there.
Cannabis just makes you, like when you really get into the nitty gritty of cannabis, it just makes you open your eyes to so many other things that are happening and how insane we have treated cannabis over the past few decades. I mean, the discrimination towards this community and the plant has been unparalleled. Like it is insane.
It is funny. It does get into kind of the ridiculousness of it when people push back because, as you said, there's thousands of years of usage of it in different cultures, and that idea that people, even the founders of America, you go back to them writing about hemp, and Thomas Jefferson writing about it in letters and stuff like that, and yet because of, as we said, I think because of the propaganda machine, because of this effort to squash it and to really taint its reputation among the populace and make people scared of it. That was one of the most effective information or disinformation campaigns that I think we've ever seen, and certainly, from a government onto its people. And that really gets, back to the whole idea that you raised before of cannabis being a gateway drug, but for good. I can remember being like 20 years old. I was at, a party, I think it was on DePaul's campus. It was a college thing with some friends of mine. And I can remember we were all there, obviously drinking, smoking a lot. And I remember feeling too drunk, and then I would smoke, and then I'd be too stoned, and then I could kind of alternate. And that was fun. That was 20-year-old me. I can't really do that anymore without some really bad effects the next day. But even so, I remember that evening having the thought, I was struck by conversing with people about cannabis. It hit me then that all these people in my life who did care about me and were coming from a place of wanting the best for me, but they told me, along with the DARE officers and my teachers and administrators, about the evils of cannabis and how you should be avoiding it. But then I'm sitting there with friends at this party, we're ingesting it, I'm smoking it, and it's taking away the bad that I was feeling from overconsumption of alcohol, and what it did to hangovers and all that was a big other reason why I kept using it. And what struck me that night at that party, which is now, God, almost 20 years ago, which is terrible, but I still can remember so clearly, even through the haze of the, the substances, I was so struck by the notion that if these people were wrong, that it didn't come from a place of malice, but even ignorance. But the fact that they were telling me so much about the evils of cannabis, but I knew through my own experience how good it was, that what else might they be wrong about? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. And I think that's so important to talk about experience, too, because, we do have a lot of scientific studies that are specifically looking at what we call in vitro data in the laboratory, where you have like a certain receptor, say it's the CB1 receptor, and you're testing different things to see how it reacts. And, we publish papers and we say, oh, this likely has, implications in the human body. But cannabis is so unique because we have millions of people putting this into our body every single day.
Yeah.
But research has never valued the opinion of daily consumers, of stoners, of actually leveraging our lived experience to say, how is this helping? What dose is this helping? What consumption method is this helping? So really trying to just probe our own community to get real lived experience data to understand how cannabis can be used for a variety of different conditions, whether it's mental health or physical health. The beautiful thing about the endocannabinoid system is it's literally in every cell and every organ of the body. There's so much potential of this system and this medicine, but we're just kind of starting to encroach and really understanding what that means for the community and for medicine, because although we do have so much research, what we are missing is some of the actual just practical publications on using this medicine, which is something that we're really trying to prioritize in what we're doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is important, and it gets to something that I've spotted that need myself, the need for like a real record of the public consumption of it, just regular day-to-day consumers. And I haven't mentioned it on the podcast yet, but I've actually been kind of working in my spare time on an app that'll allow people to, answer some simple questions, play some games, and basically get data of, what they're like before and after consuming, what the various substances that they consume, what those effects are that they can feel, as well as measuring their performance on those games and, and those questions answered before and after, as a way of just kind of starting to move in that direction of filling this gap. Like you were saying that, we have pharmaceutical data, we have research data, we have studies that are filed and reported and published and all of that, but the data from the everyday users, the consumers out there in the world, getting a system of inputting that and then being able to kind of use a program, whether it's AI or people just studying it, looking into the science of that data, it is crucially important because, as you said, people are using this every single day, and we need to see not just like if you could have a way of measuring what it's actually doing to their bodies, but them self-reporting too. How are you feeling feeling after you took this certain thing? How long does it take before you feel that? Why did you start it in the first place? And then playing a game before and after consumption where you can actually measure things like short-term recall, maybe hand-eye coordination, that kind of thing. It just feels so obvious to me that that's something missing in this puzzle, you know?
That's really cool. Sounds like a really cool app, and I can't wait to use it. But you're so right. Like, data and numbers speak volumes, especially for advocacy purposes, too. If you're somebody listening who participates in your local politics, you know, data is what we need. Personal experience definitely matters, but backing that up with numbers is so valuable, and something that I respect from the cannabis community so much is how much people really want to share their experiences, because our society has provided a lot of guilt and shame to daily cannabis consumers, but people still know that there is so much value that it's adding to their lives. So I get so many messages that are like, study me, because I've been using X product, or I've been using cannabis for so long, and it's helped me in XYZ way. And people just want to share that, but they really don't have a platform to do it. And a lot of the research that we're doing started from just either conversations or even comments on videos. And I'll give an example of this. Early on when I started creating content, I was talking about edibles. And I kept getting these messages. I wish I could feel edibles. I can't feel edibles. I can only feel them when I take 500 milligrams or a gram of THC. And I'm like, sis, if you got to take a gram of THC, you can't feel edibles either. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of THC.
Yeah.
So this actually led to a longitudinal study, meaning it takes place over time, where we were studying cannabis consumers, and we had about 5,000 people participate in that study. And 16% of people couldn't feel edibles at all.
Wow.
And this number has never been documented in literature, ever. Like, we didn't know that. But imagine if there was any other drug out there that 16% of people couldn't feel the effects of. Like, we would want to study that, and we would want to know why, right?
Yeah.
It's a very high number. So, you know, even just comments on an Instagram, TikTok video really led us down this path of even asking that question when we were doing this other study. And we would have never asked that question if we didn't know that some people didn't feel edibles. But thanks to the community feedback, we were able to really refine that question and really make it useful to then again use in advocacy. And then we're actually working on a research project that dives into that a little further from a mechanistic point of view. So it's like, you know, everything's related, and we're just so happy to have this connection with consumers, because also consumers trust us as researchers because we smoke a lot of weed. Like, people,
Yes.
I know that sounds crazy, but like,
No,
you know, we were talking about this stigma and this discrimination for so long. And it's like, okay, so then the government's going to come and perform a study or a research study, and then people are just going to drop everything to participate in government research? Like, probably not.
Right.
Like, you've been pretty terrible to us.
Exactly. Like, when you spent decades telling us the evil of this, now I'm supposed to just let you in here and watch my behavior and think that you're going to be doing it for the right reasons? Like, absolutely
Right, I
not.
trust you. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, that resistance makes perfect sense. It's like, why would I ever? You have made your position on this issue very clear. And then on the other side of it, like you were saying, Riley, when the scientists studying it are open about their consumption, when somebody like you is putting out the content that you're doing and you're clear on your messaging and you're just like, hey, listen, I'm wanting to answer this question because it's worth looking into. The edible thing specifically, I've seen that too. I mean, you just have a conversation with people, but 16%, that is significant. And it does kind of hold up with the amount that I think anyone in this community that you hear that exact comment from people who have just said that they don't feel it. You start to hear that enough, and it makes you think that there must be something there. But as you said, you know, that was never looked into until you guys decided to. And those are the kinds of questions that, like we're talking about, when you, even though we know important information, there's still a lot of nuance along with novelty that can be discovered when you figure out the right parameters specifically to study and the right groups, the right questions to ask, I suppose, in terms of what people are consuming, how often, and looking into exactly what it's doing to people and the differences in the effects that people feel from it.
Right. And it's like the need for education isn't only for consumers either. Physicians are not taught about the ECS or the endocannabinoid system when they're going to medical school. And I get approached all the time from physicians being like, I need to know more. And, they either have to, pay out of pocket or just take time to educate themselves, which isn't always practical. So, really focusing a lot of our education on that top-down approach and trying to educate the medical providers, which then can send that message to their patients, I think is that I'm very, very passionate about that because, I know not everybody is going to trust me and I don't want everyone to blindly trust me. I want you to do your own research and I want you to talk to your doctor. But the more doctors that we can get at least familiar with some of the base knowledge of this, I think that's really where cannabis can start to explode as this normal medicine that can also replace other medications. And just to be clear, I'm not an unbiased scientist and I never claim to be.
Right.
I genuinely think cannabis is one of the safest, most efficacious substances to ever exist. And as I mentioned, I think it has a lot of power on the brain too. And something we really, really, really need right now as a society is connecting with each other and connecting with nature and finding happiness. And I really think that cannabis can help in more ways than we're even evaluating it right now. And it just seems like the time is right now for cannabis to kind of break through and become a mainstream medicine because our society needs it right now. It's pretty clear, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I also agree on the point that it's important to be upfront and like we're saying, you are a scientist, but as you said, you're not claiming to be unbiased on this issue. You're very pro cannabis and your messaging on the issue is consistent with that. And I say the same thing. This podcast is about taking a journalistic approach to it, but I'm very pro cannabis and I believe that it can help people with a whole wide array of quality of life issues that might be plaguing them, whether it's anxiety, body pain, chronic sleep issues, whatever it is that you've got. There's a long list of issues and symptoms that I believe cannabis can help with. And the whole goal of me doing this was to have conversations like this one where we are just exploring those questions of sort of like what we do know about it so far and how those things we do know about it are informing these discussions and how it informs what people can benefit by using these things. And I'm really excited for the future of the channel Cannabichem on YouTube, listener, as well as the Reefer Wellness book that Dr. Riley Kirk has coming out in the near future. You can head to youtube.com and the channel is CANNABICHEM, Cannabichem. And Dr. Riley Kirk, thanks so much for stopping by today. I could talk to you all day about this, and I hope we can talk more in the future.
Oh, I hope so too. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. So thank you so much for having me on.
And there you have it, listener. I want to thank one more time my guest, Dr. Riley Kirk. What a lovely woman doing some amazing work in the field of cannabis, studying it deeply, getting an understanding for the genetics, the molecules, how the endocannabinoid system receives these, how the entourage effect does a dance among themselves, and kind of how that impacts all of us. And then again, the education portion, doing what she does, doing the studying, and then sharing that information with the world. This is amazing. She has become a real idol of mine in this space, and you can find her videos at Cannabichem, CANNABICHEM on YouTube. And she's putting out stuff every week. She puts out short videos. She puts out interviews like this one, longer stuff. Highly recommend you subscribe to her channel because it is full of great insight. And if you're interested in cannabis information like I am, you want to stay on top of the newly discovered stuff, Cannabichem on YouTube is where you want to be. Now, I'd like to get to one news story that I thought was worth your attention this week, listener. Scientists found a cannabis compound inside a totally different plant. That's right. Not a hemp plant, not a cannabis plant. Scientists found CBD, which, if you don't know, is officially scientific termed cannabidiol, cannabidiol. And they found CBD in a common Brazilian plant, opening potential new avenues to produce the increasingly popular substance. The team found CBD in the fruits and flowers of a plant known as Trema micrantha blume, or bloom, B-L-U-M-E. Not really sure. Haven't gotten a pronunciation guide here, but it's a shrub that grows across much of the South American country and is often considered a weed. Molecular biologist Rodrigo Moura Neto of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro told AFP last year. I'm getting this article, by the way, from sciencealert.com. I've linked it below. It came out last week on October 5th. CBD, increasingly used by some to treat conditions including epilepsy, chronic pain, and anxiety, is one of the main active compounds in cannabis. I'm sure you've heard of it by now, listener. THC and CBD are obviously the ones that most people are talking about, even though there are exciting other ones. Riley will tell you about those on Cannabichem. CBG is one of the populars, THCV, CBN for sleep aid. There are a lot of cannabinoids that are starting to become popular on their own, but THC and CBD are the real OGs that people have known about for years here. And CBD is the one that has been sold increasingly over the last decade or so around the country. So the compound's effectiveness as a medical treatment is still under research, though. CBD, along with THC, the substance that make users feel high, the article notes, that is the narcotic portion of cannabis. It's the THC that gives you that high buzz. Neto said chemical analysis found Trema contains CBD but not THC, raising the possibility of an abundant new source of the former, CBD, one that would not face the legal and regulatory hurdles of cannabis, which continues to be outlawed in many places, including Brazil. Neto said, quote, "It's a legal alternative to using cannabis. This is a plant that grows all over Brazil. It would be a simpler and cheaper source of cannabidiol," end quote. Scientists had previously found CBD in a related plant in Thailand, he said. Neto, who had not yet published his results, said he now plans to scale up his study to identify the best methods to extract CBD from Trema and analyze its effectiveness in patients with conditions currently treated with medical cannabis. His team recently won a $500,000 grant, real actually. It's just over $100,000 US grant from the Brazilian government to fund the research, which he estimates will take at least 5 years to complete. A study by market analysis firm Vantage, that is market research, estimated the global market for CBD nearly at $5 billion US, projecting it would grow to more than $47 billion US by 2028, driven mainly by health and wellness use. That completes the article. I've still linked it below. By all means, check it out for yourself. But, oh my God, think about that. CBD was just found in a plant that is not a cannabis plant, that is not a hemp plant. It is a totally different weed that is popular all around Brazil. And not only that, they found cannabidiol in another plant related to this, Trema, in Brazil. They found it in Thailand as well. So the fact that there is actually CBD out there in the world in plants not related to cannabis or hemp really says something about this compound. There's got to be a reason for that, and I look forward to the results of this study that scientist says he'll be doing over the next 5 years. But I definitely thought that was worth bringing to your attention. I think you'll be hearing more about this in the coming weeks, and definitely something to monitor. But I thought in terms of the legal cannabis space, hard to overstate the significance of that. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, leave a rating or a review for this episode. If you liked what I brought, if you found any value in this information, do me a favor and rate or review the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe and also share it with your friends. Tell anybody you think would be interested in learning about cannabis. Spread the word. It always helps me out, and the more people that listen, the more of these episodes that I can do, and I can justify continuing this journey, which has been such a joy for me to do. Thanks again to everybody who showed me such a great time at the Shy High Afters, that Benzinga conference after party this week. at Homestead on the Roof. It was wonderful, great to meet you, and I look forward to seeing you more again down the line. Follow the show at C-Man Podcast on X and Instagram, and Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook page and YouTube channels. And do me a favor and subscribe to the Weekly Chronic as well, the newsletter that I told you about. There'll be a new issue of that out on Tuesday of next week, and I look forward to talking with you on there as well. If you have any messages, you can reach me there. You can always text Cannabis Man 2 by scrolling down and hitting that text link in the description notes. And real quick, before I wrap this up officially here, I forgot to mention there's a new flavor of Wink Seltzer. I wanted to talk about this with the other products I've tried, but I forgot. You need to try this new Wink Seltzer flavor. Again, unpaid sponsorship here. I am not being paid by them. I'm not a spokesperson, but I do love Wink. I have interviewed the GM of Warehouse Beverage, Phil McFarland. I've got another interview with Wink coming up in a few weeks, but the flavor is Cran Blood Orange, and they have it on store shelves now for Halloween. It's an October release. It's very limited, but I have tried it and I love it. I cannot say enough positive things about this flavor. It is Wink, always does a good job. I love their black cherry as well. That was my favorite before this. But if they can extend the Cran Blood Orange, I would have this every weekend. It is such a subtle orange flavor. That's what you get up front, but there's a little tartness to it. And as with all Wink products, it's sugar-free, no calories, very light carbonation. So it's not hard, but it's a nice beer substitute if you're looking for that. The flavor of Cran Blood Orange is worth exploring, and I think you should. It's out on store shelves now. Wherever you find Wink, W-Y-N-K, seltzers, you can find the Cran Blood Orange flavor. Thanks again so much for listening. Give that a try. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Reach out to those you love. Tell them you love them. Give them a hug. Our time here is limited. Enjoy it. Squeeze the most out of it while you can. I promise you won't regret it. And enjoy some cannabis, too, this weekend. Enjoy the fall, the leaf colors, all the beautiful Christmas of the air, and do check out Dr. Riley Kirk on Cannabichem on YouTube. You'll find some good information there as well. Have a great week. We'll talk next week on the Cannabis Man Podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Good Son.